So before we hop in, I do want to say I originally did intend to stream the Labyrinth so that way we could kind of enjoy it as a community, but I've been really busy over the last couple of days and I just decided to sort of work on it in my spare time so that way I could try to get together some tips and tricks and everything and get a feel for it so that way I could give you guys a decent set of information that would hopefully help you beat the Labyrinth overall. So let's go ahead and hop into this thing. We'll start with, first character selection going into floor 1. So, luckily for me, I was able to beat the Labyrinth on my third attempt, and before that, I did 2 tries where I originally used the champion Meliodas to begin with, because I was like, hey, I don't want to go for like the super long, tedious sort of run by using SR Liz in the beginning, but I guess I underestimated how it was going to go, and although Meliodas was decently fast, and he's a pretty okay backliner because you get basic stats if the characters have 2 or less cards. He ended up just not being super helpful, and I don't know. I mean, you could definitely use him if you get like better luck with the characters and everything that you're gonna pull, but for the actual run that I tried, I ended up using the green skinny king, and it was super fast, and his ultimate just basically blows through all of the enemies at the same time, and you don't have to worry about it taking absolutely forever. Whereas, like, I mean, you could definitely use him as more of a decent backliner, or you can use SR Liz. The only problem I have with SR Liz is that she takes absolutely forever to get through any of the stages by herself. Even though you get 2 extra card, or like you get 1 extra card use in the beginning now, she just deals so little damage, and you can get bad RNG and just pull nothing but heal cards and stuff, and it is a huge hassle. I do not recommend it, but hey, if you want to go from like maybe the more efficient run and have her in the back so that way you heal up a little bit passively every turn, you can try that out. But I didn't have a whole lot of fun with it. I thought it was a little bit more interesting to sort of just experiment, but yeah, let's move on. So, with this very first run that I did, the biggest thing that I found to be very interesting, I guess, was that I went for the right path to begin with, and the very first set of like hard enemies that you go up against that have a passive that you can get absolutely annihilated me. I don't know what it was with those characters. Maybe I just didn't have a decent setup yet, but like I was doing basically 0 damage, and it was just not a good time. So I found that going for the left path with my later 2 runs was definitely a bit easier, and even then on my second attempt where I did use SR Liz, I made it all the way up to Tarmiel, and the fact that Tarmiel heals so much, which he's the first boss if you're unaware, the fact that he heals so much from his just passive, and he tanks very well because of his stance and everything, unless you just have really good damage output, you're basically just going to be fighting a brick wall, and then he's going to slowly whittle you down with his ultimates and ult removal cards, and you're basically going to lose. So you basically have to start working on like forming a decently cohesive team early on and trying to grab as many good passives as you possibly can. So yeah, Tarmiel was kind of a pain, but on my third attempt, once I got past Tarmiel, I was able to blow through the entire rest of the Labyrinth, but we'll talk about that in just a minute. So, first and foremost, the biggest thing that I see people saying, as far as like the other videos that I've watched people do on the Labyrinth, whether it be like the early people on JP or the people on Global now that it's out, the biggest tip I always end up seeing is like, oh, you want to go for a human team, go for the human team. The human team is the best team, and although I do agree that the human team is probably the best team, you cannot force a run in this game by going pure human team. It just does not work. I would definitely recommend you just sort of work in the passives that you get and try to build your team from there. So I was lucky enough in my actual attempt where I was able to beat the Labyrinth to where I started to get really good passives for goddesses. The very first passive that I think I got that was really good was like increases attack by 150% for goddesses. So I was like, hey, it's kind of a gamble. There's not nearly as many goddesses as there are like demons or human characters, which I was pulling a lot of demons in my my character selection, stages and everything like that, and my shops and everything. But if I could, if I could get lucky enough and I could re-roll enough times and try to actually pull goddesses and stuff like that, it would work out, super good with that passive. So I just went all in on it. Hoped for the best. It actually ended up working out. I would say if you end up getting a really good passive early on, whether it be for, you could potentially go unknowns, but I think the unknown team might be the weakest because a lot of the really good unknown characters are collab characters, which are not going to be in the character pool, unfortunately. So I would recommend you stick with either full goddess, full demon, or full human team, and then depending on which ones you sort of roll in your build up through floor 1, try to start focusing on those characters as you move through the labyrinth. I don't necessarily think you have to just, immediately pick the best human that you can out of the lineup, because that's what I tried to do in my very first 2 runs, and it fell apart. You either don't get the, any extra passives that work for you, or your character selections are bad and you can't pull any decent humans or whatever, and it doesn't really end up forming the team that you want it to. So you kind of have to just rely on a little bit of luck and just kind of take what you get and sort of hope that you can roll with it and see where things go. So for instance, once I was able to get the 150% attack on goddesses, the very first character that I rolled after that was Sariel, and Sariel absolutely demolished basically this entire labyrinth by himself almost. Like, his AoE card is a Sever, if I'm not mistaken, and he would basically just one-shot every stage except for like the boss stages, of course, and that was super, super helpful. So basically after that, even though I wasn't able to pull a whole lot of goddesses early on, just investing those extra goddess passives into him alone was good enough to where when I did come across extra goddesses later, they obviously got the benefits from those goddess passives, which was really, really nice. So it wasn't until like way later on that I ended up getting an extra goddess, but I don't think Tarmiel was too bad. Once I had enough damage, I basically just went in with my Sariel cards, bursted him down pretty quickly, and then I didn't have to worry about him too much after that. So, I would definitely say my second biggest tip for this labyrinth is save as much currency as you can for rerolls on either passives or characters, because obviously those are going to be the 2 biggest things that rely on you actually winning this thing. As you progress through the labyrinth, of course, try to grab as many of those level up and awakening tiles as you definitely can, so that way you boost your characters up and they can actually do more damage, of course. But the passives in this thing are incredibly overpowered if you can actually get characters that they apply to. So luckily, it doesn't lock you down to where like these passives only work if you have a full goddess team or anything like that. So once I was able to beat Tarmiel and move into floor 2, I kept with the left path, just because I thought, it would work out for me. And the very first little, character tile that I came up to didn't have really anybody good in it. It was basically all demons and then a human character, but because I'm saving my, rerolls and stuff like that, I ended up rerolling and was able to get the Light Elizabeth very quickly, which was probably the best decision I could have made, because I don't know if you can roll Mayel on this one or not. I would assume it might be a possibility, but she's basically like the hardest hitting goddess if you can sort of build her up and everything, and she has a really nice flood card and an AoE card in case my Sariel doesn't one-shot the phase using his AoE card, so I can basically stack AoE cards, which ended up working out really, really nicely. And later on, Elizabeth ended up becoming my go-to hard-hitting character. Like, you see all these runs where you just use the one Escanor and obliterate the stage in one hit. That ended up being what my Light Elizabeth, not Goddess Elizabeth, ended up being. So just kept stacking passives. I was lucky enough to end up pulling several good goddess passives, but if you don't get anything that you need, obviously you just try to reroll if you have the currency for it. If you get a whole bunch of passives that are oh, here's a human one, here's a human one, here's a demon one, just reroll, see if you can get a goddess one. If not, see if there's one that doesn't necessarily apply to a specific race, and then take that one, so that way hopefully it can help you out. But it's a bit of RNG. It's a bit annoying in that regard, but overall, it ended up working out for me. I think you just kind of have to take what you can get and then sort of hope for the best. But once you sort of build them up enough, it becomes increasingly crazy. It snowballs very hard and becomes way easier towards the later end once you get like super OP. Alrighty, and so the last thing that I want to talk about for floor 2 is the Sariel boss at the very end. He is very crazy because the lower his HP gets, the more crit chance and crit damage he gets, and he can do an absolutely crazy amount of damage. The biggest thing that you have to worry about, though, is the fact that he has a 30% damage cap, which means you would technically have to hit him 4 times in one turn to be able to kill him, which is obviously impossible because, I mean, unless you just, I guess, get super lucky and get an ultimate that can hit twice in one turn, which is very unlikely, I would say. You basically are just going to have to hit him 1 time, do damage cap with it, which, I mean, I guess you don't necessarily have to do damage cap. I guess worst case scenario, you do 10%, so that way your next 3 attacks do damage cap at 30%. But I just used one of my Sariel AoEs or single targets, I can't remember exactly which one it was, and I did 1 damage cap to him, which brought him down to 70% HP, which means that he was getting a 30% increase, if I'm not mistaken, or maybe I think he gains stats depending on every 1% of HP lost. I can't remember how much the stats are, but he gains a lot. So he ended up going, or I did 1 turn where I attacked once. He was able to kill 2 of my characters just off of the 1 turn that he ended up getting to use, which was absolutely devastating. I was like, oh no, like I think I might have screwed the run here, but you basically have to get some sort of damage on the board. I guess if you have some sort of like a lighter attack that you can use so that way he's not doing as much damage, that would be best, but you're basically just going to have to roll with the punches on this one and hope that he doesn't have like too many AoE cards in hand or something, but I was able to luckily do damage cap on all 3 of the cards that I used in the second turn. Even though he killed 2 of my characters, I just revived the 1 goddess character that I lost, which I think was Sariel, because I ended up beating it with Light Liz, and then I just revived him on the next turn and sort of went into floor 3 there. So he, I think, is the hardest boss out of all 3 of them, because Mael at the very end doesn't have a damage cap or anything. You basically just want to, like, if you're super OP with your passives at that point, you can try to just one-shot him, and it should be hopefully pretty good. So, I don't know, obviously, depending on your RNG and everything, you could get bad passes and not be that OP by the end of it, but yeah, that's my tips for Sariel for sure. So, moving into the last phase, or the last floor, I guess, floor 3, honestly, just try to keep moving your way through. If you already have a good team set up by this point, just try to focus on going towards any of the level up or super, or, yeah, I guess technically they are super awakening, but the awakening tiles as well, so that way you can build your team up. I ended up prioritizing the awakening tiles more than the level up ones, just because you do gain XP and level up over time just by fighting some of the stages and stuff like that in the fight. I actually ended up going into the depths while I was only like level 90 or something like that. I think I was 89, but I was gaining XP each time that I beat one of those stages, so I was able to sort of build up over time in that as well. But you won't have any chances. You don't just acquire an awakening or anything like that over time. So I definitely tried to prioritize that over anything else. But once I got my core team together, I ended up pulling Margaret on this phase, or on this floor, which was just like icing on the cake, you know. Once I had her, like, I don't necessarily needed her, I didn't need her cleanse per se, but getting her like damage increase and damage decrease for the enemy was super helpful at just not only surviving, which I didn't even really need to survive at this point because I was doing so much damage. I was just one-shotting every fight that I came across. So she definitely helped in the whole, I guess, vision of making sure the team was doing like big damage. So that helped out a lot, going to any of the stages or the shops and just grabbing awakening and stuff, so that way I can make sure that my characters are, you know, getting as much stats as they can possibly get, was obviously pretty big. And then moving into Mael, he really wasn't hard for me at this point because my team was so overpowered, I guess. I was able to get the 150% attack for goddesses. I got that passive 3 times, so I don't know exactly how the scaling on that works. I don't know if it applies once and then applies again, or it just applies all 3 of them at the same time. I have no idea how some of the weird like passive scaling works in this game, because I don't think they intended for it to work in some aspects. Like, they don't intend for you to get so much stats at one time or whatever, so I'm not exactly sure how that calculates, and I didn't ever check my stats, unfortunately. I really wish I did, but Yeah, Mael was kind of a pushover. I did look at his passives and everything, and it didn't look like he had anything too crazy. I think he like heals if you end up going for like an ultimate and he doesn't die from it. And then like I want to say he does a lot more damage depending on debuffs, which luckily my team did not revolve around debuffs basically at all, so I didn't have to worry about that at all. But I was able to pretty much beat him in one phase, which means that he didn't even really get to do any damage to me, and it ended up working out very, very nicely, I would say. So I don't know. I guess hopefully your team is super OP busted by the time you get to him, so that way you can just one and done and not have to worry about any of his passives or anything like that. But I didn't even get to see him attack, so I don't know. It's kind of hard for me to give you any sort of tips on that one if you don't end up having like a really good team. But ideally, if you get lucky enough and you're playing into your team's strengths, you should hopefully be like super well off by the time you get to him. And last but not least, we have the depths, which honestly, the first two Labyrinth that we got, I was really interested in the depths, but there really wasn't a whole lot of like actual reason to fight the depths at all. Like, I mean, it was insanely hard. Unless you got like a really gimmicky, like overpowered team in the previous two, you weren't really going to be able to fight the depths basically at all. But luckily they've sort of reworked it enough to where like with these OP passives that you get, it's not too hard to get super built up and actually be able to take on the depths pretty easily, I would say. Like, I mean, I was still basically one-shotting every single depths floor that didn't already have a revive on the character. So it really wasn't too bad, and you definitely want to try to build up to an OP sort of build, so that way when you do get to the depths, the more floors that you beat on the depths, that's actually where you end up farming out the currency for the Labyrinth shop, which actually has a couple of decent rewards in it, but a lot of them are just like purchase one time and you're done at that point. Like, there's a couple of like other stuff that you can get, but none of it's like crazy. There's a card that you can get, and there's a set of diamonds and some like hammers and anvils and stuff that are kind of nice as well. But overall, I think the shop is a little weird. I guess if you get like a good OP run, it's not going to take you that long to farm the Labyrinth out, I guess. But I was a little bit disappointed with the actual, options that you had. But I don't know. The depths really weren't too bad once I was already built up, so I can't really give you a whole lot of like tips there. Obviously, some of the characters do have a revive, which don't go all in on like double buffing and then just attacking once on some of the stages, I guess, is my biggest tip. So that way you can make sure that hopefully you attack once with your big OP busted character, take the health bar down, they revive, you use a second attack to hopefully kill the HP that they sort of rezzed back with. But it really wasn't too bad. I don't know if you have any sort of extra tips or tricks or anything that helped you get through a run. Definitely leave those down in the comments below. I'm sure somebody will help or get help from those, because everybody's experience with this is different. There's a lot of luck and RNG involved with the characters that you roll and the passives that you get, which are definitely the two biggest things that make a run easy or hard. So that's basically all I've got for you. I actually really enjoyed this one. I thought it was pretty fun. I do think that the lack of variety is a little bit unfortunate, like the fact that you can't sort of build like a weird team. It's basically just going to end up being like a mono race team if you really want to be super efficient with it and beat it as easily as you can. But I guess there's always room for like experimentation if you're really into just messing around and you want to try to, make it fun for yourself, like challenge yourself. I guess you could try to not go for like a mono race team, but it's obviously going to be a bit harder. So thank you guys so much for watching. Hopefully you guys enjoyed the video. Feel free to subscribe if you haven't already, and I'll see you guys in the next one.